Okay, I want to get started here right on time. My name is Will Knedlik, and I'm the president of the Washington State Good Roads and Transportation Association. We want to welcome you to our third quarter meeting. I'm going to take about 5 minutes here for the welcome so that more of our 70 plus registrants can be here. But at the present time, we have about twice as many as our quarterly meetings typically had when we met at the Ranch House restaurant in Ellensburg for years for our quarterly meetings. So I'm very appreciative of your participation. This is an important day, I think, for our association, and I hope for roads and other related infrastructure. We have a big day all around. The First Lady of Ukraine remains in our country. The President has COVID, and Liz Cheney will have the gavel tonight. So it's definitely going to be a big day in a lot of different ways. But I want to just give you a thumbnail sketch before we get to our keynote presentation on Greenroads of how we got here as an association. We recognize that major infrastructure has been quite environmentally harmful over the 200 plus year history of our country. The Erie Canal, the early turnpikes, the interstate and national defense highway system, hydroelectric dams, they have all been built with inadequate attention to the environment. And a large part of what is now major expenses for our roadway system is environmental remediation, which necessarily needs to be done, and in many cases is a function of how the road systems were built. And we think that it's very exciting that someone is thinking about green roads elements and about a sustainable transport concept. And so we're so pleased to have Councilwoman Jeralee Anderson speaking to us. The way we got focused on preservation and maintenance grows out of a conversation that was held as part of our annual meeting several years ago in Walla Walla. I think it was the 117th annual meeting. And the 6 regional administrators, I think 4 of whom were there, were talking among themselves about the various things that were going on in their regions. And Todd Trepanere, who I didn't know at the time, talked about large chunks of the Vantage Bridge deck falling into the Columbia River. And the way things are among the RAs, somebody else topped that story with a bridge that almost totally fell into the river in another part of the Columbia up on the Canadian border. And that led to other, can you top this kind of problems with the road system? And the chief state engineer who was with us and who is the boss of the 6 regional administrators summarized for us, and he said, quote, "We have infrastructure that is crumbling under our feet now," end quote. And that set us off on a focus to see how concerned the legislature was about our state's most costly and valuable piece of capital, the most valuable capital asset, crumbling under our feet now. And that has led to a lot of work over several years trying to focus and refocus the legislature's attention on this. And as you know, the Move Ahead Washington package has $3 billion allocated for preservation and maintenance. And Chair Jake Fye is entirely too generous in suggesting that our constant harping about this issue for the last 5 years played a role in causing that to happen. But as part of our 119th, I believe, annual conference in Spokane, we heard from the head of CRAB and the head of TIB, and we talked to them about how, if in fact the state is drastically underfunding preservation and maintenance of its system, how are the counties and the cities doing? And both Ashley Probert, who I see is here today, and John Koster, then the head of CRAB, indicated that the problem cumulative among all the cities and all the counties were each as large as the underfunding of preservation and maintenance for the state road system. And so that's been a concern of ours that we really haven't focused on until now, because we were so focused on trying to get the legislature to come through with some real money for maintaining the state road system. And so one of the things I want to ask, one of the things I want to ask Ashley when we get to his presentation is whether or not 5 years later things are better, worse, or about the same for local government roadway infrastructure. So with that bit of background, I want to introduce our keynote. Jeralee Anderson is not only a PhD engineer, PhD in engineering from the University of Washington, not only the founder of the Greenroads Foundation, not only the director of its business functions as the Sustainable Transport Council, and I hope she'll explain to us something about both of those organizations, and also the visionary that sees that Greenroads are a necessary, if not sufficient, element to deal with environmental issues. So, Jeralee, please feel free to introduce yourself further. I just want to say she's involved with Beagle Rescue, and our road system very much needs a rescue. So I hand it over to you with pleasure.
Well, thank you so much. I did prepare a presentation for today, so I'm looking at trying to share my screen here. So I'll start that slide deck for you. I sure appreciate the invitation. Thank you so much also for to Will for inviting me, and also Billy, if he's here, for the recommendation. I'm looking forward to having a good conversation this afternoon. I'm sorry, this morning. And the question I'd love to answer for you is what makes a good road a green road, and how that aligns up for this organization and what kinds of things that you can take away. Again, my name is Jeralee Anderson. I was introduced as Councilwoman Anderson, but I've been in infrastructure much longer than I have been on the council. I have been working in infrastructure since 2004 and kind of dabbled a little bit. I would describe myself as a recovering structural and geotechnical engineer. I found my way into the transportation industry through the LEED rating system for buildings. When I found out as a civil engineer, I really didn't have a lot of control of the outcomes of what building projects would be. A story I can share is that my boss said at the time, well, steel is recycled and concrete has fly ash in it, and that's about as much as we can do, which inspired me to go back to graduate school, where I came to the University of Washington, ended up being tricked into doing a PhD, and here I am today with a company under my belt, working through infrastructure and partnering with local governments, major state agencies, countries, and more. So I would say I'm extremely humbled to be able to share some of these stories with you today. I'm a construction engineer by trade, and I do love my beagles. I have 3 of them at home here. Hopefully they will not join the conversation today, but often they might. So I will share that that's one of the functions of being stuck at the stay-at-home work environment, but I appreciate the grace in that regard. So today we're going to explore what makes a good road green and equitable, and set you up to meet some of the funding and policy priorities in the recent infrastructure legislation for the state of Washington. I'll share a little bit about the vision of our organization, introduce you to the organization itself, and frame the issues facing the industry, although Will did give us a little bit of a preview on that. And we'll talk a little bit about the tool called Greenroads, which is for sustainable road building. And I've got plenty of examples for you, so I might have to cut myself off on time and in order for us to take questions or have a conversation offline. So my goal today is to leave you with at least one thing that you can take with you to start doing today in order to bend the curve in your own community on your next project. Or if you're in a policy side, something that you can share as a story that can help initiate the next steps in your own community. So here is the Sustainable Transport Council. We just recently rebranded. Our legal business name is Greenroads Foundation. So I think to answer Will's question, they are the same organization. I did not start 2 companies. Greenroads has expanded in the last year and a half. We have a new strategic plan going forward through 2025. We are a nonprofit 501c3 organization based out here in Redmond, Washington, and started in Washington State in 2010. So this is way before I was on the council, and really an inspiration out of what we've done as work at the University of Washington, which I'll share with you in a bit. Our vision and mission is to really transform the way transportation projects are built on a global scale. And we do that 1 mile at a time. Incremental improvements are really the way to go. And what we're facing right now is an incredible investment in infrastructure, which really initiates and catalyzes some of those conversations going forward. Our mission is to benefit communities ultimately and the environment by building more sustainable transportation projects and helping people do that every day. We have 3 programs at our organization. We have a membership program, an education program, which is really the meat of things, and the project rating program, which is what I would call our Hollywood program. And we'll show you a couple of success stories as we go forward in the presentation today. I'm happy to take any questions about these. These are not as much related to the big story that we'll share. But I am very excited to share that our organization has grown over time. Once we started the organization, we're almost at 7,000 users, almost 2,000 organizations all around the world. It got much bigger, much faster than we ever expected. And currently we operate in 11 states and 8 countries. We started out at the University of Washington with the research question, if green buildings, why not green roads? And it was a 5-year research project funded through the State Pavement Technology Consortium, which includes Washington DOT, California DOT, Minnesota DOT, Texas DOT, and sometimes Florida. We've also had some funding initially through the Federal Highway Administration. The Oregon Department of Transportation did a significant pilot program back in 2008. And then TransNow, which is now called PacTrans, is the University Transportation Research Center over at the University of Washington. And we would say we invested a significant amount of time in making sure that what you see is calibrated and tested on actual projects. So we know it works for communities that are really interested in forwarding sustainability and equity in their community. So if green buildings, why not green roads? Here's the story about making the case for sustainability. What we know now is that business as usual is really not getting us where we need to be. We have substantial impacts on the environment, the society, and the economy wherever we go, and we can really do a lot better than we are. I mentioned this earlier. We're looking at essentially 1.2 trillion once in a generation opportunity to really invest and change the game in what transportation looks like going forward. Most of what we're doing now is something that many of us will not see again for another 50-something years. So it's really important that we do it right. We take the time to correct some of the issues that we've seen before. And then from Washington's perspective, we're almost looking at $17 billion invested over 16 years to really change the game in transportation for the state. So why is this important? So to personalize this issue, we have a massive infrastructure footprint. And what that means is, what I'm specifically referring to is that the footprint of the actual construction of these projects is huge. It is almost as much as 100 times your family's annual energy bill. And that is without the tailpipe emissions, which are significant and definitely most of the emissions in transportation. However, we can measure and manage our carbon footprint with tools that are available now. So we are able to mitigate some of these impacts on the day-to-day in our construction projects. And that while roads can connect people to place, they do so at the expense of disconnecting, fragmenting, and destroying sensitive ecosystems. And when it rains, oils, toxic metals from tires, and other pollutants are flushed into our rivers, lakes, and oceans. So why in the world would we keep replicating this framework? This is a picture of salmon migrating across the road over in Thurston County, if you're not personally familiar with this, but there's clearly something in the way. And we can really make some improvements in terms of flooding and all sorts of ecological connectivity as well. The green construction market is one of my favorite charts that I share in many of my presentations. There's not only there's there money to be made in the green construction sector, transportation isn't even on the map. So if you look at this chart, the way you get into the engineering news record chart on green contracting is to have revenue that's tied to participation in a third-party rating system for sustainability. And I'll just make sure that I put this in context here. This is we have a $17 billion transportation practice. And if every single one of the Move Ahead Washington projects went through a rating system program for transportation, we would blow the entire commercial offices sector out of the water. In terms of government projects, the only thing here is airports. This is mostly vertical construction. Thinking about it in terms of transportation, I live in Western Washington. We have two major infrastructure projects, the 520 floating bridge, and we have the Big Bertha tunnel project, which are together just two projects that would make a substantial impact greater than the entire education sector for vertical construction. So there's definitely opportunity here for being a part of building a market and advancing practice going forward. So one of my favorite books on rethinking our approach in general to sustainability that provides a foundation for how we built and designed the Greenroads rating system is a book by Jane McGonigal called Reality is Broken. And she says, a game is an opportunity to focus our energy with relentless optimism at something we're good at or getting better at and enjoy. In other words, gameplay is the direct emotional opposite of depression. And after COVID, everybody is in that same boat, and we're really looking forward to moving things forward, making some change, taking advantage of these opportunities. And it's best if we can do that with a little bit of joy. So I'm happy to introduce you Greenroads. Greenroads, for those of you who are not familiar, the LEED rating system is a great example of what this is like. If you're familiar with LEED for your communities, we'll talk a little bit more about policies for LEED later on. Greenroads is similar, but it is specifically built for transportation projects, but it works the same way. You get points toward overall goal, and there's a collection of best practices that you can pick and choose from to use on your project. Rating systems are tools to help measure, manage, and especially communicate to your stakeholders what you are doing about sustainability and equity. And if you really want to go and change the game, start making rating system tools, of which there are many, part of your sustainability strategy. So from a community perspective, integrating into planning, tracking and managing your performance for specific indicators, that's really the way the industry is headed. So a rating system tool can be a really good soft entry into those types of things. Greenroads specifically covers design and construction, but that does not mean that planning and operations or system planning and operations are out of the picture. Anything you do when you put projects into the ground will impact how it operates in the future and what changes need to be made for the next plan or planning cycle. But we're really looking at thinking about how environmental emissions don't happen until you break ground. And then will it work in your community? This is a little bit about what Will's question was. So we used to be Greenroads Foundation. Now we are officially Sustainable Transport Council. And the reason is because part of our strategic plan will include expansion to the rails mode as well as multimodal projects. So an example would be a transit center could get a green modes rating, and a green rails project could be something like the Sound Transit line or a different type of rail project. Part of that is just generally how we communicate about roads, and it feels a little bit narrow for folks that we work with. But ultimately, the rating system itself does focus on all types of transportation projects, big budgets, small budgets, and more. So a green road looks like this. One of the some of the benefits or part of the great things about a transportation project and a rating system is it helps you understand, if you go walk on that street, you can see and touch and feel what things have been done that actually create a specific benefit or outcome that moves the needle on sustainability. So for example, we'll look at a couple of examples later, but for example, maybe you had a quality control plan and you have a higher quality pavement that lasts a longer time. So you don't have to come back and maintain it, and therefore it's less expensive. Perhaps you've used a recycled material that's reduced the emissions prior to producing the material so that you have a lower carbon footprint on your project. Maybe you've done some really creative things to create safety for pedestrians and bicyclists. You've maybe reduced your water footprint by using native vegetation. There's lots of different ways and things that you can do as a laundry list of items, in fact, that will help move the needle on sustainability. What we do see is that not every project focuses on that scope of work, and there are definitely limitations to doing that. However, when you have those conversations with your team early in planning, you can often get a higher value, a more comprehensive solution. So when rating system tools can help initiate those conversations early on. So I'd like to say that Greenroads is the next great game in sustainability for transportation. And what does that look like? We have a rating system, which is actually a publication. You can think about it like the recipe book for a sustainable transportation project. And then the rules of the game are in a book called the Rating Handbook, or the Policies and Procedures. Those are all things that are available on our website. If you'd like to learn more, I'd be happy to share that with you as well. So what are we talking about when we look at a comprehensive system for a transportation project? We have 8 different categories with 72 credits in the current version, which is version 3. There are 12 of those that are required. So you must do all of those things. You can consider that to be the baseline to be a sustainable transportation project. And we'll look at a couple of examples a little bit later about what that means. There's 6 categories, which we call core credit categories. So that really focus on design and construction activities that you can choose to do as you're going through the project development phase. So for example, if you are a stormwater engineer, you're probably going to be looking at a lot of environment and water category credits. If you're really a transportation planner, energy and mobility and access and mobility are really important if you're in an urban area, especially. But these do also apply if you're in a rural environment too. And then the meat of it comes through in terms of labor, delivery, procurement process, and how you're spending, what choices you're making to invest those dollars into the ground. Preparing through the supply chain for materials and production, as well as the actual execution of the work, are in construction activities and the materials and production categories. Overall, that comprehensive voluntary participation, you can earn up to 135 points. That's generally not as, there's basically a menu of options you can choose from. Not all projects will do all things. These points are based on life cycle assessment, so we know that they have a specific impact over a specific amount of time, and they're all backed by research and evidence that goes into it that definitely says, yes, this is definitely sustainable, and it's probably about a little bit above and beyond business as usual. Finally, my personal favorite category is the creativity and effort category. It acknowledges that a rating system doesn't do everything for everyone, and it gives some room to highlight things that a particular project really feels is valuable, capture new innovative ideas that can be brought back into the industry so other people can use them, and highlight things like emerging technology. And overall, at the end of the day, it's 150 points, and you need 50 to get on the board. So far, after 12 years, we've got only bronze and silver certified projects. So gold is a real challenge. We have several projects that have tried to go for gold, and then something has happened during design and construction that didn't make it happen for them. But so far, those things are still, we're still looking for the first gold certified project in the world. At the end of the day, currently where we're at, we have over 130 projects registered around the world, 64 certified in the world, and 31 of those are in Washington State. I manage a portfolio of about $35 billion. And then there's a way that you can take the exam and become a sustainable transport professional as well. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about our projects here. Cool. So our first project that I'd love to tell you a little bit about, and this is actually, since Ashley's on the phone, this is a project that was funded by the Transportation Improvement Board, state of Washington. This is both a complete streets project, is a gap completion project, a trail project, and it is an example of what you can do with less than $1 million for sustainability. This was a mill and overlay project combined with a trail completion project, a bridge replacement over a creek. And the best part of this particular story is something called Pottycrete. We can show a very innovative materials strategy for this project. If you consider what you would do with 400 toilets, the city engineer got a phone call from the housing authority and was a nonprofit that was replacing 400 toilets, which is about 80 tons of toilets. And he worked with the company and the aggregate company to crush up those toilets and prevent that from going into the landfill. And they called it pottycrete. I'll show you some examples here. So one of the things that we were able to recognize in this project was extra points for thinking about materials management. This project itself came out of a pilot project that the city had done before going through the certification process, but ultimately ended up with the first certified project in the world, which is in Washington State. You can go make a pilgrimage up to Bellingham if you'd like. But there is essentially a commemorative toilet seat in the pavement. I think it's been filled in by now. It's over 12 years old as far as the project goes, but it was a great experience and a great example of collaboration between industry and the government partnerships. On to the maintenance idea. So there's definitely the most sustainable thing that we can be doing is preserving what we already have. And historic El Camino Real at Monterey Highway was notorious as the worst and most noisy road in the entire state of California. This is our first certified project in California, and the politicians in the city were definitely hearing about it. So maintenance came to the rescue and overlaid it with new asphalt made of recycled tires, which made the ride smoother and quieter. And it also fixed all the potholes. It reused 97% of the existing road and cut costs by 23%. This is a cold in place recycling model. And what was great is that that cost savings allows the city to reinvest that half mile of savings somewhere else. So that is pretty significant. You can see here the total score ended up right on the line. So it is possible for these maintenance projects to achieve a rating. We don't have a good example here in the state of Washington on the specific one that's as big of a scale as this $6 million project in San Jose. And I wanted to pull out another example here of a safety improvement project. This is our first certified project in the state of Ohio. It's called Route 4 Holden Boulevard. It was about $2.1 million. And a few things that were highlights of this project. It expected and designed to the highway safety manual to reduce fatality injury accidents by 11 and property damage impacts by 28 over the next 3 years after completing the project. During construction, there were no reported injuries of construction staff out of 178 workers and no environmental fines or violations at all. They completed ahead of schedule and under budget by 10%. Finally, the other project that I'd love to show is our signature project in the state of Washington, still the world champion, East 40th Street in Tacoma, which was named the world's greenest road right at the end of 2019. It treats stormwater from 37 acres of the surrounding neighborhoods and is more than 6 times the size of the street itself. They added a new shared use path and teamed up with local students for an art project to tell a story of what happens when it rains. And they used a special coating on pavement, the sidewalk, to paint poetry into it that shows up when it gets wet. And there's a photo of that later on in the presentation as well. Overall, it did a really great job in the environmental category, and Tacoma is one great example of a city that has a policy on green roads that will repeatedly produce these kinds of great projects. So just overall, in terms of the number of projects we worked on so far, we have a huge collective impact. These are a little bit out of date in terms of statistics, but just some highlights here. When it comes to Move Ahead Washington, especially when we're focusing on capacity building for pedestrian, bicycle, and transit, there are ways that we can measure that in terms of mileage, in terms of users, in terms of placemaking and access provided. We can also check our safety statistics to make sure that they're safer as well. So there's just generally some great things that are beneficial for people, and we can track and measure that. In terms of the Better for the Planet collective impact, there's a project that we've recorded over 33% reduced footprint from construction. An average, if you're trying to make, or if you're trying to beat a Green Roads project, you're going to need to set your targets at over 25% recycled content or a 93% waste diversion rate from the landfill. Also, we're pretty happy to see that we keep racking up the acreage on enhanced treatment for stormwater management. And when it comes down to the pocketbook, we're really looking at improving local economics development, adding value to communities, making sure that we're keeping those dollars invested in the communities that they came from, and building employment opportunities for local communities as well. We've got some projects that have documented savings in terms of long-term as well as initial cost savings, and love to see the opportunities for things like innovative finance, which is one of these examples here is the Selwood Bridge project. It's a design build project. I'm just going to give some highlights really quickly of what makes up a sustainable road in terms of opportunities for getting your minds thinking about what you could do today. So participatory planning is one of our big picture things. Community engagement, stakeholder involvement is a really important part of every transportation project. You need to know what benefits you're offering to the community. And in some cases, especially with major projects, you need that social credibility in order to advance your project in the first place. The community participation event here is shown for our 183 South project, which is over a $750 million project. They did a significant amount of public involvement, used context-sensitive solutions to get that project over the bar, and moved forward through the community. Here in Seattle, the Equity and Accessibility and the HEAL Act will be part of this whole big story as well. So Greenroads in a more sustainable road is not just about the environment, it's about how people interact with your transportation project. And really things are some great examples on these projects about making sure there's access to transit, safe ways to walk and bike in that neighborhood. An example of enhanced treatment. So another way that you can earn points for environmental enhancements is to add things like bioswales and rain gardens. They're not required for Greenroads projects, but they are something that we initiate and looking at low impact development as ways that you can help improve the stormwater environment for a particular project. And while energy efficiency in the last decade has become a sort of a standard as with LED lighting, instead of high pressure sodium lamps, energy efficiency is still sort of the bread and butter of sustainable transportation conversations. So taking a look here at this lovely glamour shot of a porous asphalt pavement, but really pay attention to the energy consumption during the operations portion of your project's lifetime. One of the other things that is great about Greenroads is that it's a standard that evolves over time. And in our current version, we allow for recognition of sustainable financing, which would be specific investment in projects or mechanisms that are used to incentivize sustainability and track and manage that performance to maintain accountability for those outcomes. Presidio Parkway Phase 2 was a public-private partnership, and it was financed by Meridian Infrastructure, who had investigated the plan and had corporate social responsibility funds that went through the LEAD program, and was looking at Greenroads as an opportunity to do that for infrastructure projects. So we think that's a huge opportunity. I'm really looking forward to seeing that going forward as well. And just from a construction management perspective, we can make our roads last longer when we take that time to invest into the facility. Our quality management is really important, and where we end up seeing a lower maintenance road over time. You can build a great road up front, and make sure we avoid those failures going forward, and make sure we invest those dollars wisely. Similarly, we covered a little bit of work zone health and safety. This is our most important asset on our projects is our people, and making sure that they're safe and healthy. On-site is a requirement for Greenroads as a project management plan to have a health and safety work plan. Not many projects have them. I was actually pretty surprised. So we've actually made this into a requirement as this particular credit has evolved in the last decade. A great example here from Bothell about cost savings related to recycled materials. They used a 20% recycled asphalt pavement for an overall recycled content on the project of 14.5%. They also use a long life pavement design that will save them money over the life of the project. I believe that was about 19%. So they thought ahead of time, how long do we want this project to last, and really try to stretch those dollars as well as those materials for making a longer lasting facility. Of course, not only are we saving money, we're also looking at saving time, and there's a lot of different innovative construction practices that can help us do that and keep on budget and on schedule from a project management perspective. It also reduces congestion, increases safety to have a shorter timeline, for most projects as well. So it saves money, time, and emissions if you have a strategy for accelerated construction. All right, so why are we talking about this? So part of this is to really think about, get your gears turning about how we can go about preparing for that big investment in a green recovery that is meaningful going forward for multiple generations. I know there's definitely different funding opportunities. In past, Greenroads in my organization has worked with the Transportation Improvement Board. We've worked with the Federal Highway Administration to develop sustainability criteria as well as equity criteria for moving these projects forward in a sustainable way. Public Works Board, I'll just put a hat, this is my councilwoman hat on. We are doing, I'm extremely proud to be the sponsor of the Innovative Infrastructure Pilot Program, which will be part of our legislative study proposal for going forward into the next session. So really looking forward to that. I'm happy to ask questions separately offline about that, but that'll be great. The infrastructure, the infra grants, the RAISE grants, Tiger grants, all of these things have programmatic requirements for sustainability. So the answers to the question of what are you doing for sustainability should be, we are going through a certification process. Certification is also really consistent with existing development policy. So just a couple of examples of the building sector and how they're wiping the floor with the infrastructure sector. They've gotten into policy in terms of different programs all around the state in a number of different ways. King County, Seattle, Washington State have adopted building policies because it saves money, because it's the right thing to do. It reduces emissions, lowers footprint, all of those things. So what are we doing about our roads? A few places in the state of Washington have adopted policies, and then our largest agency that has adopted a national policy has been the New Zealand Transport Agency in 2015. Each agency is doing it a different way. So first was Ordinance 38495 in 2014 for the city of Tacoma, and they've advanced at least 8 projects so far through the program. The city of Bellingham is also neck and neck with Tacoma, and they use their comprehensive plan to adopt a requirement for their Greenroads projects. Again, this is all about the dollars investment and those that investment for future generations. Just a couple of things here that you can definitely tie to research that shows these things are better. So the real question is, why aren't we doing all of these things all at once? We know if we take the opportunity to invest, we will get a payback and a return on that investment. Meanwhile, show your commitment to sustainability is a really important part of our message for all of organizations and public, private, and more. To think about our partners and the different organizations we get to work with every day on the projects is a way to showcase what you're doing well. So corporate social responsibility is a big piece of this. In part of our membership program, we're sponsoring our education program. Those kinds of things will help advance the entire industry as part of that. And then finally, jobs, jobs, jobs. This is definitely a way to show leadership. The number of jobs that are generated on Greenroads projects is considered to be a green job if you're working on a project that's pursuing a certification. So thinking about how you're developing your staff, what kinds of workforce development that you're doing to initiate and make sure that that training goes to the people who are putting these things into the ground. And then finally, a little bit of that joy. This is one of my very favorite slides. It's probably over a decade old, but it's called The Resulting Glory. So one of the best things about infrastructure projects is that they're incredibly unique. There's always something that is different about a project that can tell a really unique community story and share it to celebrate at the end of the game. So there's definitely a piece of this that we've never lived down that Potty Creek story. I'm sure that one will be one we repeatedly tell, especially since it made it into popular mechanics at the time. So how can you help? We are building tomorrow's infrastructure today. And ultimately, infrastructure really brings us together in a divided world. In Washington State, we have the most certified roads in the nation and in the world. And so it is really time for us to raise the bar and lead the way. We cannot miss out on the opportunity to build better roads. The Move Ahead Washington funding priorities align with the goals of our program, or at least this vision, even just some of these little ideas that you can take with you. But how it gets funded is one thing, and how it gets built is definitely another. So your preparation and creativity is key, and it will get us at least an inch closer to that next mile. So let's start measuring and get in the game. You can find more information about us on our website at greenroads.org, also transportcouncil.org, and follow us on social media if you'd like to help. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. I am looking forward to hearing stories about what you're doing in your communities for sustainability and equity, and I'm happy to take some questions. How did I do on my time?
Well, you're a little over, but I'm going to scoot the response from the Good Roads Association over to the afternoon, so we're okay. Let me just ask you one big picture question, if I may, and thank you for a wonderful presentation and for helping us understand the variety of elements that are involved. With the road system being either the largest component of the built environment or one of the very largest components of the built environment, can green roads be a major part of the solution to our environmental challenges, including climate change, or is at best its contribution limited to not making things worse and making minor remediation? Could you sort of help us understand the big picture, and then maybe you'll be willing to come back and talk to us at a later date about the bigger picture?
Sure. So big picture, that's a wonderful question. A rating system is an incredibly limiting tool, right? The other piece of this is just getting started does take quite a bit of energy and investment. There's a lot of learning curve going into something brand new that is complicated and a little bit challenging to understand and initiate the first go. What we've seen in the last decade is that learning is happening. So that big picture, we're seeing some of that moving and advancing the industry. So that is good. Greenroads itself can be a catalyst for doing that. I would say ultimately, what we're really looking for is changing standards and specifications. But those things update every 5 years, 10 years, something like that. So the speed of the industry and technology is really a big part of that whole story. The rating system program is designed to evolve with the industry and be a little bit beyond that business as usual. So that is really the incentive to participate, to keep learning, sort of that continuous learning and continuous evolution model, big picture. Do I think that it can do all these projects? If you take a look at the LEED rating system, it's less than 1% of the entire building sector. It's not the entire market. So there's plenty of ways to use tools like this without pursuing certification. But what that certification does is add that accountability and assurance to the general public, to the agency, to the owner, that you are doing the things that you said you're going to do, that they are measurably improving what you're trying to do and achieve some of these goals. So the fundamental on that is that if you have decided to do green roads or to make a more sustainable road, a tool like this can help show that you did that. Does it actually change things? I would say yes, it changes attitudes, and it can change behaviors as well.
Well, I just want to thank you so much, and I see that David Gent from the Washington Asphalt Pavers Association is here. I was thinking about him when you were talking about the mix you had up in Bellingham.
Yeah.
We'll have to get you back and perhaps on a panel with Dave to help us understand the challenges that as well as the opportunities. So thank you so much for doing something that I don't think the Washington State Good Roads Association has done in its history of soon to be 124 years. So awesome. I hope we can continue this dialogue, and I so much appreciate your presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And anybody who would like questions, I can put my email in the chat box.
That would be great. That would be great if you would. And if you want to field some questions in chat, that's great too. But
okay,
I really want to invite you back if you're willing to come.
I would love to.
Okay.
I think the last time I talked was actually at Dave's presentation was a while ago. So yeah, absolutely. I'd be more than happy to come back.
Okay. You have a great day, and I hope you'll be able to stay with us for some of this presentation on the Washington, the Move Ahead Washington program.